The parallels between Israel and Ukraine in the context of the war have arisen repeatedly. Both countries were attacked and forced to defend themselves. However, as the two wars progressed, there was a sense of different attitudes toward Israel and Ukraine, as well as different opportunities for military action. While Israel has no limitations and receives full support from the United States, Ukraine is in a more difficult situation for this reason and with an even stronger enemy. And in this issue, we will discuss why Ukraine does not and cannot behave like Israel, and what is the fundamental difference between the parties. The first is the support of the United States at different levels. The United States helps both countries in these wars and calls both countries partners. The aid from the Americans goes to both Israel and Ukraine. Instead, there is a sense that the United States treats Ukraine and Israel differently. Despite its support for Ukraine, the United States is constantly limiting it, but it is ready to support Israel under any circumstances. This was clearly felt at the beginning of 2024, when the transfer of weapons to Ukraine was delayed, while there was no discussion of a similar issue with Israel. It became obvious that Israel and Ukraine were in a different hierarchy in the eyes of the American establishment. This state of affairs developed for a variety of reasons. Israel is a longtime partner of the United States in the Middle East, and has been an important outpost of the Western world in the region since the Cold War. It was then that Israel proved its viability and commitment to its values, and only then did it become a strategic ally of the United States. Ukraine, in turn, is a fairly young partner of the United States. Therefore, the attitude towards it is quite simple and even distrustful on many issues. The length of the relationship plays an important role in this regard. The problem also lies in bipartisan support. Israel definitely has it, but Ukraine has had problems with it, in particular because of the position of the Republicans, who do not consider Ukraine as important a partner as the Democrats. Interestingly, the motivation to support Israel among Republicans may even have a religious connotation. Many Christians consider supporting Israel to be a biblical canon. There are other smaller problems. But in general, Ukraine is lower in the hierarchy of the American establishment. Therefore, Israel is allowed everything, and Ukraine is limited. The general perception of not only Americans but also Europeans in this regard is also interesting. Israel, as a traditional ally of the United States, is considered to be somehow inscribed in the Western world and is part of it in any case. Therefore, the defense of Israel is associated with the defense of the Western world and values. In the perception of the same countries, Ukraine is not a Western Ukraine, even though it is located in Europe. There is a sense of alienation in both Europe and the United States, despite the official statements of a number of politicians. This is probably also due to Ukraine's domestic politics. While Israel is traditionally considered the main democracy of the Middle East and the one that fights for similar values in the region, Ukraine cannot boast the same set of regalia. In Europe, Ukrainian institutions are significantly weaker than European ones, and even against the backdrop of Eastern European countries, Ukraine looks far from good. The second important point is the issue of self-sufficiency. Despite the fact that Israel continues to receive aid from the United States, and it is regular under the agreements, the country has long been independent of the U.S. military resource and can fully provide itself with weapons. Israel has one of the most developed military-industrial complexes in the world and a fairly effective independent army. Ukraine, on the other hand, is extremely dependent on Western supplies and cannot continue the war for a long time without them. At the very least, it will lose significant ground without Western weapons and assistance. That is why Ukraine itself is more limited in its actions at the front and has to wait for a long time for permission to attack Russian territory with Western weapons, because it has almost none of its own. Israel, on the other hand, is not limited in this regard and uses its weapons against enemy targets. Sometimes the United States and its Western allies are not very happy about Israeli attacks, but they cannot do anything about them. Ukraine's dependence on the West creates a number of restrictions on military campaigns that may not be very satisfactory to Western countries. Moreover, the very use of Western weapons makes countries responsible for their use, especially when it comes to sensitive areas. That is why, for a long time, weapons use permits were limited to the territory of Ukraine. A separate point can be made about Israeli lobbying in Western countries, particularly in the United States. Ukraine has no such trump card. Lobbying plays an important role in the United States, and Jews have a serious number of organizations that persuade politicians to side with Israel in one way or another. This is also one of the oldest, called the American Jewish Committee. There is also an organization called the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and many others. The Jewish diaspora has been significantly present in the United States and has been influencing politics for decades. In addition, there are many influential and wealthy Zionists. Ukraine, on the other hand, has no serious lobbying organizations, neither in the United States nor in other countries. To a large extent, this state of affairs has developed historically because Jewish migration has always been a serious force in the United States and in some other European countries. Ukrainians, as a rule, did not create their own migration organizations, and there has never been much Ukrainian migration. This is also related to the generally weak democratic core in Ukraine compared to Israel. The most important point in this regard, of course, is the enemy. Despite the fact that people like to compare the war in Ukraine and in Israel, in reality they have not much in common and much more differences. In recent years, Israel has been fighting exclusively against underground or semi-underground organizations in the format of military or anti-terrorist operations. The age of major wars for Israel has long since ended in the 20th century. The main threat is not from regular enemy forces with a limited amount of weapons and ammunition. The war has largely been reduced to a war with underground groups, not with states and not with large armies. We have seen this over the past year when Israel, with its serious advantages, eliminated the entire infrastructure of Hamas and its leaders. Ukraine, on the other hand, is at war with the world's largest nuclear power, with a huge army equipped with the latest weapons and equipment. Logic would seem to suggest that Ukraine should receive more assistance, but in practice, the situation is different. It's different because the United States itself is afraid of Russia, but sees no threat from Hamas or Hezbollah. Obviously, a huge nuclear power is a challenge to the United States, while underground groups are nothing. This logic leads to the fact that the United States is afraid to engage directly in a war against Russia. Moreover, Russia also has nuclear weapons. Israel's only major adversary in the region is Iran, which has no border with Israel itself, and more importantly, no nuclear weapons. That is why we have seen the United States and its allies actively shoot down Iranian drones and missiles flying at Israel, and do nothing in a similar case with Ukraine. Therefore, the logic is reversed. The weaker the enemy, the more the United States is willing to provide active assistance, as it carries minimal risks. The more capable the enemy is, the more measured and cautious the United States will be. We have seen all of this throughout the military campaign. Talk of escalation, fear of the slightest interference, restrictions on the use of weapons, etc. To summarize, Ukraine cannot act like Israel for a number of reasons: lack of American support, problems with self-sufficiency and lobbying, and most importantly, because of the difference in adversaries. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos.
I never answer to no, man, I still go, go, go.